Welcome to the Sela episode of the Christian Men at Work podcast. We're in between my interviews with Christian men. I talk about 5 things. S is something on my heart. E is an example of faith at work. L is logos, or a passage from Scripture related to work. A is an announcement. And H is a handy tip to help you be more effective at your work. Men at Work, welcome to episode 208, which is Sela episode 104. Today I wanted to share with you some work tips that I learned from Genesis 33. These thoughts originally came out of a quiet time that I had this week, and I highly encourage all of you guys listening to make a quiet time a part of your life. It was not a part of my life until this past year, really the past 6 months, and it only became a reality when I started setting my alarm clock an hour earlier in order to read a chapter in the Bible and ask God to share with me what He wanted me to know about that chapter. I just can't say enough. It directly affects our work because you are starting the day before you go to work in touch with your Creator and talking to Him and listening to Him. I can't think of a better way to get ready for your work day. Let's get into it. So 4 work lessons. So initially these thoughts that I received were, I was thinking applied to life in general and to my personal life, and they do. But the more I thought about it and looked back over my notes, the more I thought that this really applied well to the workplace too. So I thought I would share it with you. So let me start by reading Genesis 33. This will be the New King James Version, starting at verse 1. Now Jacob lifted his eyes and looked, and there Esau was coming, and with him were 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the 2 maidservants. And he put the maidservants and their children in front, Leah and her children behind, and Rachel and Joseph last. Then he crossed over before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And he lifted his eyes and saw the women and children and said, "Who are these with you?" So he said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." Then the maidservants came near, they and their children, and bowed down. And Leah also came near with her children, and they bowed down. Afterward Joseph and Rachel came near, and they bowed down. Then Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company which I met?" And he said, "These are to find favor in the sight of my Lord." But Esau said, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." And Jacob said, "No, please, if I have now found favor in your sight, then receive my present from my hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face, as though I had seen the face of God, and you were pleased with me. Please take my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough." So he urged him, and he took it. Then Esau said, "Let us take our journey. Let us go, and I will go before you." But Jacob said to him, "My Lord knows that the children are weak, and the flocks and herds which are nursing are with me. And if the men should drive them hard one day, all the flock will die. Please let my Lord go on ahead before his servant. I will lead on slowly at a pace which the livestock that go before me, and the children, and are able to endure, until I come to my Lord and Seir." And Esau said, "Now let me leave with you some of the people who are with me." But he said, "What need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord." So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. And Jacob journeyed to Succoth, built himself a house, and made booths for his livestock. Therefore the name of the place is called Succoth. Then Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, and he pitched his tent before the city. And he bought the parcel of land where he had pitched his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. Then he erected an altar there and called it El Elohe Israel. So the first lesson, and again, you may in your quiet time read this and receive something totally different than what I received, but this was the first work tip that I received, and that is to glorify God and esteem him for all the people and things with which he has blessed me. When Esau was asking him, Jacob, about who were all these people with him, and he said, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. When you're in the workplace and someone asks you about something that you have accomplished or that you have in your work sphere, have you ever thought about responding instead of saying, this is my project, or thank you for the compliment about my project? Have you ever thought about saying that this is something that God has given me? There's different ways of saying that. If you don't feel comfortable evoking the name God in the workplace, perhaps you could say, oh, thank you, I feel very blessed. Or deferring credit to maybe even if someone else, if you feel more comfortable with that, or in some way not taking credit personally for something you've achieved at work, but deferring to others, preferably to God. And I'll leave it up to you as to how you might want to say that. And that's not necessarily an easy question. I'm not telling you should say it a certain way. I'm just asking you, how can you glorify God and esteem him for the blessings you have in the workplace? All right, number 2, consider others with the goals that I pursue at work and the pace with which I pursue them. On the way back, or on to finishing his journey, Jacob intentionally thought about his livestock and the people that are with him, and he changed the pace with which he went on his journey to their final destination. So I would ask you to think about, is there anyone at work that God wants you to think about on the journey that you're on right now? In other words, are you only thinking about yourself when it comes to meeting a certain objective at work, getting a project done? Or is there someone else that you should be bringing with you and maybe going at their pace? And that could mean different things for different people. Maybe it means instead of just getting the job done, you're taking the time to show someone else who doesn't know as much as you do about how to get the job done. In other words, mentoring. Maybe it means taking a little bit longer to get a job done so that someone who has a physical limitation isn't rushed. It could mean several other things, but I ask you to think about how that might apply to you. Okay, number 3. Keep in my mind always the end goal to arrive safely in the place God has intended for me, as well as those with whom he has entrusted me with. This came to me, I think, the language where it talked about how they arrived safely in their destination in Shechem. And I just thought about having the end goal in mind when you're at work. And that end goal might be meeting a certain objective, getting XYZ of your task list done. It might be getting a certain quota that you have at work. But there's a people side to every job too. In other words, there's what you do and there's how you do it. So when you think about your goals at work, are you taking into consideration everyone in your team, whatever your team might be, and what is it going to take for everybody to get to the goal safely? And how is the relationship between you and the people you work with going to be at the end of this journey or this goal that you're on at work? And then the fourth tip is, along the journey, have a giving heart and esteem others above myself. So Jacob humbled himself before Esau, and he was very giving. He wanted to share with Esau his blessings. I would just ask you to think about, what are you sharing at work? Do you have a generous heart? And maybe it's buying someone a lunch at work. Maybe it means sharing your knowledge like we've talked about. Maybe it means sharing a smile, being generous with your positive attitude at work. Is there any way that you could use this day as an opportunity to give to others at work and to esteem others above yourself, regardless of what your title is or their title is? And those are my 4 work tips. So I want to finish out with you might say, a non-spiritual but valuable tip for work, and it has to do with the use of meetings, kind of along the lines of how we've been using H for the SELA for a handy tip for work. So this came from some communication I had received through work around meetings, and I thought it was just excellent, and it's something I've been implementing myself. And the goal of this is to avoid holding a meeting simply to ensure that a previous meeting met its purpose. I don't know, depending on your job, meetings might not be a thing, but for me, having effective meetings is a big deal. It can make a big difference between whether things go well with the projects I'm working on or not. It can also mean whether time is well used or wasted. And depending on how many people in the meeting, that can really make a big impact on a lot of different people. So meetings to me are kind of a big deal. So I was really interested in this topic. So let me just go ahead and read it, and maybe I'll have a few comments here at the end. You planned the meeting well. You had all the right people there. You controlled it with the precision of a brain surgeon. So that's that, right? Not quite. Now comes the time to focus on what to do after the meeting ends. Taking on more work after a meeting might seem to betray the goal of unlocking more time to focus on the right projects. But in the long run, a good meeting follow-through will save time for everyone involved. A recap supports good outcomes and prevents redundancy. Many people agree this is one of the worst meeting outcomes, scheduling a meeting after the meeting to ensure the original meeting served its purpose. Good planning and follow-up can make this a thing of the past. Some meetings are succinct enough to be self-contained, but most benefit from a recap to ensure everyone is on the same page. Here are just a few of the reasons for a written recap. In meetings with virtual participants, it can be hard for everyone to hear everything. If the host or note-taker can't verbally recap the meeting at the end, a written recap makes sure everyone took away the same conclusions. Number 3, a recap for meetings with multiple action items creates an extra layer of accountability. Number 4, if someone doesn't need to be in a meeting but does need to know the outcome, a recap or summary can reduce the number of meeting attendees. If the meeting generates actions, be clear on what they are and who needs to carry them out, and make sure to send out a recap within 48 hours so items are fresh in everyone's mind. Recap structure matters. Following a standard format will help readers quickly identify the main points and know what's expected. Start the subject line with the word recap in all caps to make it identifiable. Structure the recap in sections. For example, decisions, actions, key takeaways, and additional information. Bold or use the @ symbol before the names of people with action items so they can easily spot their name. List major conclusions and lessons learned. Provide links to recordings and presentations. And finally, gather feedback. How did your meeting go? Feedback is important, and there are various methods to seek it, using polling tools to solicit feedback or follow up with a few participants to gauge their opinions. For larger meetings, plan to save a few minutes at the end for live feedback. So I just wanted to say that I have put some of these tips to use since I read this article, and it's really been helpful because I probably lead more meetings than I actually attend. And so this was kind of a really big deal for me to be effective, not just during the meeting, but in the follow-up, because everyone's so busy. So it's easy to just kind of leave a meeting and forget about it. But by sending this recap email out, it kind of summarizes what was discussed, what actions were agreed to, who was going to do them, and by when. And the whole point about, some people aren't able to attend meetings because they have too many meetings usually. But to get a follow-up recap like that so that they know what was discussed can be a real benefit to them. And you may want to go back and listen to this again because there was a lot of detail, but hopefully that helps you out. And that'll do it for this SELA episode. I love you guys. I hope you have a wonderful week. God bless.